again, I seem to have, no, it's there. Can people see that?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so that's my opening slide today. Now, so have people sighted on my screen and of me? Yeah.
Yep.
A thumbs up is as good, and I should have my chat feature up as well, but I don't. I do the chat towards the end. Okay, so today
Colm, can you unmute, please?
Yep. Have I unmuted successfully?
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So now, today we're looking at public relations and annual reports. And I suppose from the point of view of demonstrating your organization's reach and impact. And then to look at just briefly where we're going with the housekeeping next. Our next session will look at the social media issue, championing your ask, and looking at your program of events or activities that your organization does for the year or for the next quarter or 60 days or 20 days, whatever we plan for. And then the final session will be looking at program fronts, what other organizations and other community groups are doing around the world in these various level of restrictions in living with our pandemic friend. And then just to give you the key dates again for our next online moments, the social media championing is not next week, but the week after on the 25th between 3 and 4. And the final one then, as we alerted you to, is the program fronts on Thursday, the 10th of December between 3 and 4. I'm nearly sure I have those dates right because I got one of them wrong last week and I apologize for that. So I've had a lot of feedback about people wondering when can they start booking the bespoke mentoring sessions. So just to get that one swatted out of the way quickly, from the 18th of November. So when you're emailing me with when you would like to do it, would you please give me three prospective times, so that if I get a build-up of a lot of people wanting to be in the space, I know, well, if I can't do Buncrana on a Tuesday, I could get to them maybe on Wednesday afternoon, because they've given me 3 slots. So when you're emailing, please give us 3 slots that would work for the team or the Krishna that's involved in your organization. And then if you can email through to me those 3 topics that you want me to discuss or help you with, and if there's any documentation, a press release, a mission chart, an organization manual, anything that would give me some background information that could assist me with you, that would be really helpful before the mentoring session. Okay, so in common with a lot of community organizations, there's this terrible melange or what's the word for it, a trifle around getting our message out. And everybody thinks that communications, marketing and PR and advertising are all in the same huddle. And to some degree, they're correct, because it is about getting people to understand what you're doing. But from the point of view of looking at the science behind how we can improve those who have to understand our message, I think it's always important to just separate out what things are not. So for the purposes of this discussion and today's discussion, I'm not going to look at any issues to do with marketing. Marketing really is anything that you have to pay for. So that would include advertising, print sheet advertising, radio adverts, posters, flyers, that sort of stuff. What I'm really going to concentrate on is where I think a lot of community organizations could do a lot more, because we don't have enough in marketing, with a little bit of tweaking on how we approach the whole public relations game and the public relations sector. One of my other roles, as well as being involved in the community festivals and event scene, is as a community magazine and online editor for my hometown here in Ballinasloe. I've been doing that for a decade, Merciful Hour. So I'm bringing to this point, to this discussion, some of the harsh realities that I understand from local soccer clubs, local social services centres, local drama groups who have constant battles with traditional media in getting a public relations message woven or stitched into their regular cycle of news feed, which is particularly awkward even at this moment in time. So for my colleagues in the Northwest, now I may not have everybody on this list, but what you're looking at in terms of hardcore press news, broadcast and print, the old Donegal Democrat, the Derry News, the Derry Journal, the Derry People, and the Donegal News, and I guess Highland Radio, maybe Foyleside, depending on where you are within the constituency. And then there's a whole host of specialist magazines that you might be involved with, Thror or Ireland's Own, or the Irish Country Music Magazine, or Donegal Today, or whatever the particular genre magazine is that will be of interest to the event or community activity that you're pursuing or engaged with. And again, today I'm not going to go through who you should talk to in these organizations. That's something that's uniquely local, but I will talk to you a little about how to build relationships with these organizations. The first point of discussion really today has to be to see the world from the media side first before we see it from our bunker. And even before COVID hit this island, our regional media was in severe crisis and severe trouble. And when I say our regional media, I mean the traditional media of radio and print publishing. The online media is a different territory and is the sector that is growing and is the sector that's going to, I suppose, carry the traditional print and published word in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years as people consume their news in a different way. But for a great many organizations, if you had a 50-page tabloid paper 15 years ago, the number of journalists to pages was about one journalist to every 8 pages. In today's world, while COVID is raging, there's one reporter to every 16 to 20 pages of tabloid print. And that has severe consequences for how we have to engage with the media outlets that we want to carry our public relations copy or our public relations photographs or our PR strategy. Because what this means in essence is that we have to do more work for the end organization than we used to in the past. And I often ask people when I'm in Lodge or doing consultancy work with them to remind me when is the last time they put an invite to local members of the press corps to attend a launch or a ministerial visit or a press reception for the community centre or the community event or organisation that they were doing something specialist for. And you'd be hard pressed to get all the hands up in the room because media tend not to go anymore to our events. They're so thin on the ground now, by the time they have the courts covered and they have the county council covered and they have the coroner's court covered and maybe a little bit of sports, that's as far as the line will stretch. Everything else has to come in from the user group who wishes to use the space. And that has implications for the way we serve them content. And that's challenging. The next question, I suppose, that I would pose, or that I would ask you to pose in your own heads is currently who's in charge or responsible for public relations in your organization? Now, not putting up the posters, not delivering the flyers, not going out with 600 posters 2 weeks before the jumble sale. I'm not talking about that element of it. It's actually who on the board, on the committee, on the team is the person who liaises constantly with the press, with Highland Radio, with the Jerry Journal, with content for magazines, with content for websites. Who is that person? And it may be the secretary, it could be the office administrator, it could be some members of crew, it could be a volunteer position, it may very well often be the chairperson, or what I tend to find is that there's a person whose brass plate on the door says coordinator. And when they have the oil tank filled and the floor mopped, and they have all the windows cleaned, and they have the rosters done for next week, and the banking done, and the minutes of the last 10 meetings given out, plus handing over all the keys to the different caretakers, they'll then do a bit of press as well. And I suppose my only point to you all is that if a mechanism or a position or a person could be found from within your team who would just take the responsibility of being the key face of your public relations campaign to the people who have to interface with you on a regular basis, you would be really, really helping yourselves a lot. Because most media interface is built up on relationship building. And it's very difficult for a journalist, a reporter, or a researcher in a radio station to have a relationship with an info at buncrana.communitycentre.com. Yeah. So again, what traditionally was the PRO's role, the public relations officer role, they handled the national papers, they handled the regional newspapers, they handled the local radio, national radio, if there was specialist community affairs programs or farming programs or music programs or Irish programs. They handled placing of copy to the magazines or to specialist trade magazines. If you're lucky enough to have television, they would have liaised there And also they would have supervised the copy and the content and the photography that goes into your website. That's all what a public relations officer of a community group or a community event would be doing typically. Today, that role is morphing into a communications role. I'm finding that less and less organizations are referring to the person who does all that as a PRO and more of a communications officer or a communications person. And that's significant in itself, because what they're now trying to embrace, and this is the totality of the exercise, is all the traditional media, and by that I mean the papers and the radio stations, the website content. So whatever it is that you may have on your website, even if it's only a one page or a shared 3 boxes on the community council's page, whatever goes up in there is the responsibility of the communications officer to make sure that it is timely, up to date, and not fossilized. The e-zine or the in-house comms, and again, this is something that we're finding a bit more common, particularly in these pandemic months, that the communication from the centre to the volunteers who can't come to meetings or who can't engage in the normal activities of the organisation, the fortnightly e-zine or the WhatsApp group with a very quick 10-point message on it is issued by the communications officer. And they're in-house communications to alert people to what's happening next, what happened in the last quarter, plans for yada, yada, whatever it is. But that's an important role for the communications officer to have, maybe not alone, but certainly to supervise. And then obviously the social and the online communications, the Facebook page, the Twitter account, Instagram account, if you're using Pinterest, if you're using a YouTube channel, if you're doing digital content with video, that the communications officer may not make all these things, may not upload them all or edit them all, but actually has oversight of how they appear to your core constituent community of audience or stakeholders when they do emerge in a YouTube channel or on a Snapchat video or whatever it is that they're making, that it contains the appropriate logo, it has the correct brand public relations messaging for the community centre, the community event, the parish council, whatever it is that you're trying to get across. All right. A lot of groups will ask me, well, what should a communications officer be doing, or what type of activity would you put to them, or if you were to create a job spec for it or a volunteer role for it, if we were to write up a role and put it into the Donegal Volunteer Centre and say we're looking for somebody who could give us 4 hours maybe a week in this space doing these type of things, what might it look like? And this is what I think the key elements ought to be. Obviously, you need to top and tail these to suit your own particular structure and your own particular governance and rules and regulations. So just communications objectives and a communications plan. Somebody has to pull that together. Very often when people complain about how they're not getting enough publicity, they don't get this, they don't get that, I say, great, show me your plan and let's see where you failed last year. And they look at me, oh, you mean the budget? And I go, no, not the budget, the actual plan that said by Paddy's Day, we will have one colour photo in the Donegal Democrat. Where's that plan? Identifying the most effective and most important audiences and the interests that you will need to communicate to. Again, there is no one press release anymore that fits everybody and everything. So you need to drill down and go, right, when we're speaking to our over 65s of the community, these are the key messages that we have to push to them for this year with our PR plan. These are the key messages that we need to bombard for busy mums and dads who are rearing kids in Letterkenny or who are in the Rosses or whatever. So that you peel back to your core audiences of who you need at your event or at your community activity, and you look at the public relations platforms or avenues and messages that you need to drop to them. Obviously arranging publicity pre-festival, pre-event and post. Maintaining awareness of the organization's policies. The amount of organizations that, you know, their mission statement, their vision statement, their policies are all appendices in grant applications. They're never kept front and center of people in the public relations campaign, which is where they ought to be. Communication within the organization between volunteers and management is important. Committee, stakeholders and sponsors up to date with news. Nobody wants to be that committee member who reads about it in the parish notes of the Donegal Democrat or Derry Journal, what they should have been informed by somebody within the organisation first. So their role ought to be in making sure that level of communication is kept up as a PR conduit. Conducting research is a bit heavy, but at least to know what way the wind is blowing in relation to attitude surveys, public opinion in your area to do with your organization, your building, your event, your community centre, your community council. Who at the moment in your organization writes the speeches for your chairperson and your president, or the various officials who may have to meet a government minister or to do some ceremony or perform something? The communications officer should have some role in that, maybe not a final editing role, but certainly to create the crib sheet or the cliff notes of the key points that that person should make on the day of the official opening, or the renaming of the road, or the addition of a new prefab for COVID measures, or whatever the story might be. To looking at photocalls, press launches, and photocalls are more important than press launches anymore, and promotional avenues to internal and external audiences. And then to build up a contact database. And in the good old days, a communications officer or a PRO or somebody who's worked with the press previously, there's such a high degree of churn going on now in press that my black book from last week would be completely different from my black book to next month. So the contacts game that we all loved is really becoming of less value. It's more to find out who is there behind the info at Derry Journal, or newsroom at Derry Journal, who covers your area, and that you can drop sweet messages to every 6 weeks or whenever your news cycle dictates that you should. Provide the public with information if it's requested, and to collate and externalize. This is something I will talk about at the end of this process today, the annual report of the organization's achievements and results for the year. So maybe you haven't got that person on board just yet, or maybe you'd like to find that person. So what other key attributes or maybe skill sets might an individual have to do this as a volunteer? They need to have bubbly and brilliant and outgoing personalities, because they're going to have to communicate. They should have a degree of self-confidence. Obviously, the ability to express ideas logically, clearly, is important. Creative individuals, I put far ahead of anybody who's technically a draught with an understanding of the human form. Quick thinkers and decision makers are always good in this role. They need to be PC and new technology savvy. That's not an expert. Savvy just means they know what needs to happen. They may not know themselves or be quick enough at doing it. They need to be digitally aware, even though they may not have an Apple phone, but they need to be digitally aware. We can find others within the organization, the community, to drive digital engines, and we'll talk about that next session. If somebody has Gaeilge, I think it's one of the most underrated uses into national and regional media, and opens up a completely different avenue of discourse on a public relations vein. So a Gaeilge would be very, very helpful. If I was to, I suppose, be pushed up against the wall to say, what is the most important thing for somebody in PR? It's the ability to write simple copy, simple words, simple sentences that convey quickly to a busy scroller or a busy reader what it is you're offering to them. Whether it's the 6-day festival in August, whether it's a 3-day St. Patrick's symposium, whether it's the gala Christmas concert moving to online from St. Crona's Church, whatever it is that you need to get out there. If somebody is going to be panicked by a blank page and a keyboard, they're no good to us. They really aren't. So crisp content writing skills, obviously the commanding presence, and then to a lesser extent, I wouldn't worry. They don't have to have been a journalist before. They don't have to have worked in RTE or worked with Foilside or with Radio Ulster. It doesn't matter. That's becoming less and less. As media is absorbed differently and more of an online, it's the content. To be able to write creative, quirky copy is, I think, key. So that might be possible in the confines of the Inishowen Peninsula, or perhaps in Nairnport New, or somewhere in Glencolmkill. So I would always say, well, then break up the role to where the expertise is clustered on your current team. So to give different people different elements of the activities that a communications officer would have to do, and split the elements of the task. That could be deputy officers or assistant communications officers who are responsible for the web and social media, who might be responsible for speech writing, who might be responsible just for the collation of the annual report, or whatever is determined by the group. You could, and here's something that's quite interesting right now, there's a number of communications, journalistic students across ITs at Kenny Sligo and all the other universities who might be interested or who possibly could. Most of their cooperative education will be done now from home. It will be done in an online capacity. They will not be traveling to take up a position and work somewhere. So might it be possible to get one of those to do 20 hours a week as part of their course to assist you in driving a PR campaign for the new fundraising of the roof for the centre or for the theatre or for the Heritage and Tourist Office in Glenties. And again, I can help people with that if they want assistance on what courses are doing, blah, blah, blah. I can, but I'm not doing that just in this. And obviously, I think you need to review internally what's available to you in the Cushta or the committee or the board, but also externally as to who is living in your community who might be able to do some of these things or have some of the necessary skill sets to do it. Okay. So every organization needs a public relations plan. And it starts by looking at what you've done in the last 2 years. So how many times, if I was doing a plan for the Donegal Volunteer Centre, I would want to see a copy of last year's and the year before press cuttings file, which is very simply everywhere where Donegal Volunteer Centre was mentioned in the local, region and national media. What type of messaging was it? Did they get people involved? Was it to do with vehicles or volunteers, or was it to do with statistics, or was it to do with education, healthcare? What do the media, where do they bracket you? How do the media portray you? And were you happy with that exposure? Did that say to your core constituents and your board and your stakeholders exactly what they thought it ought to say about the Donegal Volunteer Centre? And then when you've that review done, and that's across the internal, the external, the free sheet. Again, I'm not too sure right now how many free sheets or free magazines are bobbing around in Donegal, but if they take your copy, what way do they handle it? So include them in the mix. The different radio programs online. Photography is important as well, and I'll talk to you a bit about that towards the middle of this, because I think it's very underrated. And we're becoming less and less text-orientated consumers. If we can't see the message as opposed to read the message, the new language is visual, it is not text. So if you're reaching out to a newer audience or telling me, oh, we want to get new families or new people involved, then don't send them 600 words because they have a notion of reading it. Send them the key photo that has enough prompts in it for them to get instinctively what it is that you're trying to do or you are about. Yeah. So look at the specific outputs and timescales for those outputs under the different headings. And again, put some deadlines or put some deadlines to yourselves as to what needs to happen and when. And I would always share with significant funders or significant stakeholders the press plan, because then you're taking on board any concerns that maybe a significant funder like Donegal County Council or Pobble or Udras na Gaeltachta or whoever might be your funder might say, oh God, make sure you don't, whatever you're doing, don't do it around this particular week. That's Seachtain na Gaeilge. We'll have enough going on. Please just bear in mind that that's going to be it could be Volunteer Week or International Volunteer Day, wrong day for that. We'll be busy doing something else. Our press team want to use that week to leverage up for the parade or for whatever is going on. So it's no harm to share what you're trying to achieve so that you don't get caught in crossfire from others. So I want to, I suppose, as a previous working journalist and an NUJ member, I'm going to make some insight observations on the A to Z of public relations. That I know this has been recorded, but I don't know if I want them to beat it on Joe Duffy, because it's really about a workaround and just trying to get, I suppose, your head around quickly into getting your copy, which is your press release, taken in your photograph by perhaps a reluctant, but very often just a too busy to be bothered media. So these are just some A to Z comments and hooks and pointers that I will go through an organization typically. So break out your audiences on the A. There is no such thing as the people of Glencolm Hill. There's different pockets within that who have to be addressed with different manners of speech, with different photographs and different motivational messages in the press campaign that will appeal to them. So for instance, a lot of young people will read the sports pages of regional media, but have no interest in reading the notes, the parish notes, are of no consequence to them. So could you find a way to get a local Donegal footballer or a local Donegal lady basket player or a swimmer who might do a profile piece in the sports section about their memories of the community event that takes place in April every year? So you're using the sports leverage to get to a different audience that perhaps doesn't understand what it is that the community event or community festival or community centre or community organisation is doing. That's clever public relations placing, because you've stripped out and looked at the audience. But rather than this traditional, 15 years ago, the PRO would come into a meeting, beads of perspiration, I've got them all sent. I've just sent 300 press releases to 300 addresses. That day is gone, because there's no one organisation that will take one press release and make the same use of it for the different audiences that you have to find. So that involves a little bit of scripting and filleting. Different clusters will look for different angles of news. And if you're wondering what an angle is in public relations, everybody understands the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. However, different news organizations might put an angle on that story that will be different from the story we all know. So for instance, the headline on the Irish Times might be "Young Child Destroys Wild Bear Habitat." There's an angle on Goldilocks and the Three Bears story. So it's how the story is spun. Budget plans in PR, for the life of you, stop going, oh, we don't have to pay for photography, everyone has a phone, and the very journal are sending out someone to us. Please, please, please include some percentage of your expenditure in this area for a dedicated photographer to you, to photograph the things you need photographed to have in your drawer for the next few months. Control, you don't have full control over press and public relations. All you can do is feed the material in as best a way as you can to the organizations that can use it. Deadlines, I'm always saying put up the big Sasco wall chart. And if the Donegal Journal's deadline is 12 noon on a Monday, your deadline is 4 p.m. Friday. In other words, you're going to have your material to them 24 to 48 hours ahead of their deadline. So it's not last minute all the time. And when you're dealing with the media in Ireland, the best weeks, the very, very best weeks for community groups, not-for-profit groups, groups like you that have significant reach, are the short production weeks. And these in the business are known as the weeks where a bank holiday falls, because it drives production schedules doolally. And there's a reason for Christmas time. There's no court sittings, there's no county council sittings, and it's full of frozen people in lakes dressed in Santa costumes jumping into the water either New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. And it's all about charity and Christmas fun and all that. The reason that consumes so much content is because there's little else on. And that's an ideal time of the year to drop in a review on the festival or the community groups or the events activities for the year past. So those short production weeks, Bank Holiday, Paddy's Day, Easter time, the May Bank Holiday weekend, the June Bank Holiday weekend, the August Bank Holiday weekend. Our festival isn't on until September. There's no point in putting anything in March. Wrong. You have to keep the wick, the lamp lit throughout the 4 seasons of the year with the press. An endorsement. I don't know why we don't do this more often. If you get a nice letter or a nice report from somebody who's visited your organization or activity and they've endorsed you, use that in your press campaign. It's worth 1,000 press releases. Feedback. If your copy isn't being taken by the Donegal People's News, ring up the editor, look for a meeting, ask can you take him or her for a cup of coffee or lunch, explain what you're doing, ask them what you're doing wrong because they're not taking your copy or they won't publish your photographs. What's the problem? Don't be afraid to go and look for some feedback. Gaeilge, I mentioned that point already. Hospitality used to be a free bar for journalists when they would turn up. Journalists, if they turn up, are driving away from your event to something else. However, for some community groups and community organizations that might have a children's corner, if you find out the journalist that's coming may have young kids, to let them enjoy the hospitality of the kids' corner or the storyteller might be a further prompt to allow the journalist to spend a bit more time with you. So just look at what other little things you could offer to a journalist, busy journalist and their family for the weekend of your community event that isn't just a free pint of Guinness or a free gin and tonic. Intelligence of or information to do with your events. There's the collective intelligence, which everyone in the community knows better than you, but also the historical, which needs to be refreshed. You know, founded in 1972 by Sister Mercedes to assist the elderly in the community of the Inishowen Peninsula. The Community Council and the Community Development Group has gone from strength to strength, running 3 parish centres, 4 meals and wheel services, 6 vans for lobbies, reminding people where the story comes from. A lot of groups don't do that at all with their press campaigns. Journalists, they're customers. It's not what we want, it's what they need. And if you can't deliver them with the content that they can use, almost by taking off the front line and saying, Letterkenny stands poised to welcome over 600 harpists and traditional musicians from all over the Northwest on the weekend of the 27th of May, thanks to the hard work of Kishta Kyotas Letterkenny, writes Senator Maloney. Now, that's all they want to change. The other 6 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs need to be stuff that they can just literally cut and paste in. If they have to pick up a phone and ring and go, what? Everything's on this except there's no dates and there's no email address, and how can people get tickets? If they have to ask those questions, they're not using your copy because it'll take too long and they don't have the time. So you need to treat them as customers. Kids always have a kiddie element. The local element, the local angle is huge for regional media and PR. And sometimes we forget that as well. It's always about the biggest, the latest, the newest, but very often we forget about the local. Master documents, the 40-word summary, or a section on your website or Facebook page that just tells the story of why you exist in 40 words is very important. And especially when so many trainees and youngsters are in press rooms now who don't know the constituency or the area they're in, because they can explain why this press release is emanating from Glencullen or from Mulgrana or from Ballybuffet. Official openings, what's new? Anything that's new, a new activity, new networking is great. People love that. New news, what's new? Yeah, it's the 37th year, but what's new about it? Official openings, I'm not too sure that these things have the same Cluagus call that they had in the past, so I'm a bit nervous about them. You need to just workshop that. Sometimes a strong volunteer night with a press attachment or a press reception element is much more value. And I would always ask people to double check the attendee list or the invitational list to those activities, because you have at that moment some 4 weeks in advance of your event to make champions of some key influencers within your community. So when I get the press release, or sorry, the press invitation to a launch of a community festival, and I don't know the names because I'm not from the locality, my first question is how many hairdressers are on this list? My second is how many beauticians, how many administrators in medical, dental, ophthalmic and chiropodic offices are on the list? And they look at you and go, Colm, should they have nothing to do with the festival? They have nothing to do with the community event. And you go, correct, but they are in places where people have to wait and chat. And if you could bring half the hairdressers of your village to your launch night, and for the extra few glasses of wine, and this will happen at level 2, level 1 down the road, fingers crossed, vaccine and all that, they can turn around in the intervening 3 or 4 weeks and talk up your program, talk up your agenda, talk up your event, because they were invited to be ambassadors for it, rather than the usual close your ears of your politicians, the chain gang who turn up to be in the photographs, and by the time they're gone to the next funeral, they've forgotten whatever it was that you were telling them about. So taxis are included in that, and people who man receptions in hotels, not the general managers, they're no good to us. The people who manage the receptions and the waiting staff in cafes and coffee docks, they're brilliant champions for your event, but they never make our lists. Pictures, I'm going to talk about that in a second, they are key. We're living in a visual world and we have to be on top of our visual game. The qualities and qualities that you have as an organization should be stressed, whether it's to be best in music or best in class, or to be the best in the community for serving the needs of senior citizens. Whatever those qualities are, they need to be exuded from the press copy. Obviously, reviewing is important, internal and external. Now, those of us lucky to have sponsors, you need to include them always in the speeches and always in press releases. And if you have a facility on your Facebook page or on your website to list the press communications that you send out, you can mention Tato or Sam Spuds or Hunky Dory's there, because it won't be removed. But I do know media outlets, particularly the ones that are affiliated with international organizations, who remove by house policy all mentions of companies who are sponsoring activities in the not-for-profit world. So at least if you include them on the outbound and give them some space in your own stable, you're covering off that. The key thing here that I suppose withers me is when I look at a budget and people tell me the most important thing is their volunteers, and I'm going, great, can I have a look at your press cuttings file? And can you show me the story about your volunteers? And they'll go, well, sure. It's about the event. It's not about the volunteers. And I'm going, actually, the volunteers are what make the event. So why don't you use your volunteers in the weaving of the narrative for your press story, for your public relations campaign? So instead of, Daniel O'Donnell to play at the Glenties Harvest Fair, instead of that headline, it's 60,000 community hours go into producing the Glenties Harvest Fair. And you've quoted in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs that the chairperson or the treasurer of the Glenties Harvest Fair team announced to a committee meeting this week that if everybody was being paid a minimum wage in Glenties to produce this event, it would take 60,000 hours between pre-production, production, tidy up, and post-event evaluation. And most of us are using volunteers in a way that we never use them in the public relations story. And I think it's a hugely underrated avenue to get new people to look at us differently, is to tell the story of the huge voluntary effort that goes into having a 3-day or 1-day or a 2-day or a 10-day activity. And also their family stories and their human interest stories. I was looking this summer, because there was so little happening, to see how many festivals would follow up with the human interest stories. Tom met Mary at a Mary from Dunlow carnival dance in '72. She was on the cloaks, he was helping with the floats and the parade, and they've been together. They married in '74, they've been together ever since. I didn't read one story of that in national or regional media this year. And it was a year for it, because they're the hidden heroes of our whole campaign. There's 40,000, about 10,000 more volunteers in community events than there is at community games. And yet, to look at the press, you wouldn't think it. So underrated, let's use them. Youth appeal, and then obviously the Zodiac to be prepared. So a little bit on photography. I always ask people, have you a series of stock shots? And they look at me and go, oh, you mean shots with our press launch? No. They're all chains and sponsors up against the wall, grimacing horribly and holding on to a brochure or a leaflet that has been launched that day or that time. It doesn't convey anything about whether your location, your activity, your ethos, or your orientation towards the market. So here's exhibit number 1. This is the Lough Neagh Discovery Centre, who ran a Children's Science Week. And this was the stock photo. So this was a photo they paid a photographer to take, and a number of others alongside it, that would in one glance summarize what the event and activity was about. So the photograph is heavily choreographed. Yeah, there's nothing left to chance here. This is a staged photograph. And when you look at it, the question you should be asking yourself is, where's your 3 or 4 staged photograph? In your community centre, in your community hall, in your village, around the green, around the pump, at the St. Bridget's Cross, at the whatever iconic landscape or locational, it could be a doorway, it could be a stage, it could be an old window or archway on the main street of Killybegs, I don't know. But then when people get it, they go, aha, we know what that is. And then the activity, whether they have a butter churn in their hand if it's a food festival, or if they have a series of instruments in their hands if it's a music festival, there are props you can use that convey. So here's the wee young fella has the butterfly, microscopic glass. He's even got the famous chapeau of Sherlock Holmes, the great detective investigator. And it was about this science week for kids. So from time to time, the association will be asked for the national press to send us up stock photos of different festivals that they could use in promotion. We sent up that because we put out the call, and this little photograph that cost about €300, I suspect, to take, ended up being 600,000 homes of the Irish Independent on the Saturday weekender. 20 great autumn days out. So they were looking at what to do with community events, with activities that could be portrayed in a visual context for a weekend supplement of a huge national paper. If the Lough Neagh science team wanted to pay for that amount of advertising space in the Irish Independent Weekender, it would have cost them about €12,000 plus that. Obviously, they didn't pay it. But my question to you all today is, where's your photograph like that, that a national newspaper editor would quickly take and go, this is the one we're using. This says it all about spring. This says it all about autumn leaves. This has everything in this photograph about harping, about seafood, about whatever it is that we might be doing. Where are your stock shots that convey this? Because too often we don't have them. We have groups of people doing different things. So I would consider always that you identify a good creative photographer put them on your payroll, and give them a list of photographs that you want taken during your community activity or event that conveys instinctively and quickly the sense of what you're at in your location, not anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. So that's photography. I will take a look at, I have done 2 press releases. One is a very good one, one is a very bad one, and also the way they appear in a journalist's inbox. And they're going to be the links in the last slide on this presentation, which we sent around to you. And I suppose I'm not asking you to write the press release word for word the way these press releases are done. It's to take the idea behind it. And a good rule of thumb for any press copy that you're writing is when you reread it to yourself, and it's typically 450 words of a photograph for a broadsheet and maybe 275, 300 words for a tabloid. That's the word count. That's as much as they take. If you read it back to yourself or give it to somebody who's not conversant or involved with a group, who's involved with a soccer club or involved with a rugby club or as a fireman or a firewoman or a nurse, doesn't know what you're at, and you ask them to read it for you. And then when they've read it, go, yeah, there's no problems with that. But say to them, does it answer your 5 W's? Does it answer the 5 key W questions? Who, what, when, where, and how? And if after reading the 300 words or the 500 words, it does answer those questions, it's a perfect press release. Perfect. Okay. So I want to look at annual reports. And these are not AGM reports. These are documents that can be produced online or can be produced, you can print them if you want, that most organizations tend to only do from the point of view of a grant or a funder requiring an annual report. Those reports are typically, they're stakeholder dependent and they're stakeholder shimmied, if I can use that phrase. In other words, you write those reports to encourage the stakeholder to maintain the relationship with you. So if the HSE Northwest was funding me €30,000 a year to provide a service, the annual report I would write for them would always ring the bells of what their issues are about. And if I was writing a report for the Arts Council, it would only evaluate an annual story on the basis of the artistic elements that would need to be covered. It wouldn't be an all-encompassing report that you would give to a Martian to explain what you did for the last 12 months, what the reach of what you did, which was different what you did, and then more importantly, the impact of what running a successful community event in Culdaff did for that community. And most of us are so busy producing the event, finding the resources to put it on, minding the volunteers and keeping them sweet to actually do it again the following year. And then keeping all the funders, the sponsors, and the artists and musicians on board, we're exhausted by the time the end of the cycle arrives, and we have no interest in writing up anything to explain what we've been doing to others because it's just too much of a headache. And my point to everybody in the sector is, if we don't blow our own trumpets, nobody is going to blow them for us. So a couple of good practice examples here. One of the best organizations in this country, on this island, that produces an annual report for its festival every year is the Fastnet Film Festival in Schull in West Cork. Their reports, I think, are available online, but if they're not, I will scan in the last one I have and send it to whoever wants it. But I'm just looking at, they took a masterclass that we did with AOIFE about 8 years ago, and we were using American reports because the best festival impact and festival reach reports in the world are American and Canadian, because they have to explain the rationale for their not-for-profit to the whole City Marketing Convention Bureau, which is made up of a variety of hotelier, game parks, tourist parks interests, not just the not-for-profit community culture and celebratory commemorative element. And it's a hard sell to make your event be rewarded with some of the tourist bed night tax dollars there. So looking at what your report should have, and it doesn't need to be, this is a 22-page report, 24 pages, a mission statement and a vision statement. You have that somewhere. Your situation analysis, just what your organization does with the other organizations. You can acknowledge your sponsors, your funders. Then there's an organization report. How many people were engaged? How many people were employed? How many hours of programming did you do? There's a marketing strategy report. Where did your marketing and public relations activities get you to? There is a design report. If you have a significant element of activity is in design, it is for the film crew. They do merchandising, so they have a merchandise report. They also centrally manage for Skull, which is a village about the size of Nairn, Portneuf. They manage €85,000 worth of bed night bookings during their festival week. And they do all the pickups and set downs from the airports of Cork and Dublin themselves as a volunteer group. And they report how many miles, kilometres, and car journeys were undertaken by their volunteer taxi corps. They also look at some statistics in terms of the number of people looking at the films, the number of people who bought from the box office, the number of people who zoomed in, who tuned in, who visited, who waved, who helloed, all that sort of stuff. They look at guests and hospitality. They looked at music and the entertainers they engaged. They always look at press coverage, which is very important for Skull, because this festival has really put Skull on the map. Skull was always associated with sailing, particularly Fastnet Rock and the story of the sail race. But this whole film festival in the last decade has given a new breath of life. There's no staff involved. They're a committee of 12 citizens. Yeah, and then some feedback, which is my phrase for endorsement, which is commentary from other people who've attended the community activity or celebration and who are happy to endorse the output because of the impact and reach that it has. Now, everybody does governance and compliance, but they don't do it in these terms. And again, most people recoil from, oh God, if we ever typed up or put into a report how many people attend a meeting, we get no one to sit in the committee. But the world is moving. And if people are going to take up valuable positions on boards or on committees or on working groups, then there is a duty, an obligation on those involved in the organisation to report on that to our core constituents. So there's the number of board members, the number of meetings they had, and just a tick box beside whether they were at the meeting or not. Non-board members and the different subcommittees. I stole that from 2016 and the walk report from Dublin. What I like about it is it's very clear, and it makes no inference as to why somebody wasn't there. And everybody is human. You can miss a meeting or two. But if somebody didn't make any meetings, or if somebody missed 60% of them, there's no way they'd put their hand up at an AGM to be asked to be seconded back or to be elected back into that. So it's a good way of flushing out that dead wood if you don't want it lying around your ship any longer. Infographics is where it's at, folks. If you are lucky enough to have a designer who would lay out in your annual report, which needs to be more than 8 pages. I've seen them at 4 pages. Just there's a service user survey. So it's the hall users 2020, the people that you engage with are festival attendees or festival audience. And you've done something on SurveyMonkey, and they're the key pullouts. 90% were happy with the program, 27% said they never saw an orchestra before, 30% thought the school's program was great. Whatever those key questions are, that again gives independent verification of the activity that you're undertaking. Yeah. So it's almost like endorsement, except you're using a survey to illuminate. And most organizations do survey monkeys from time to time, and then the results are left in a management, minute. I'm going to get that into your annual report, because that's validation. That's your core user group saying out loud, we enjoy this, we like this is important to us, please help us continue it, which is the subliminal message of any annual report. Most Irish people wince when I ask them to include their annual accounts in an annual report. Well, if they want the minutes, if they want the AGM finances, they have to come to the meeting. That's fine for the 20th and 19th century. For the 21st century, if you want to collect a euro of your fellow citizen, you had better place what the other euros did last year somewhere in front of them, readily accessible. Now, I accept there are governance issues that if I'm a member of the Donegal Volunteer Centre, I may not be entitled to see management accounts. I may not be entitled or obligated to see certain things. But there's nothing to stop us using pie charts and bar charts to give an indication of how much it costs to produce the running of the event, the type of expenditure levels that we have, the main headings that they are about, and placing them in an annual report. Nothing at all. It's just bad practice. When you hear this, oh, well, our auditor accounts are available on request, that is shorthand for go take a running jump at a rolling donut. Whereas the wiser organizations at not-for-profit level are just plopping this information into an appendix. Appendix 1, our annual snapshot of what we did with your money and everybody else's. Yeah. And there's been a lot of commentary about governance and charitable foundations and not-for-profits, and some of the stuff that's gone very sour has had huge impact on this. So my advice always is hide behind a full pane of glass. Leave that stuff out there, because it's easier to ask for more when, oh, did you not see your annual report? Page 42 will tell you where last year's money went, plus where the deficit, plus how we were cut back from central government, or whatever the story is. Easier when it's out there, as opposed to, oh, well, I'll get the treasurer to send you on those documents. Nobody's time to do that. Quick snapshots, nice slides, figures are there, and visually presented tells the story. I think you need to compare and contrast always in annual reports. So there's a very simple one from a food festival that I like. Just looking what happened in 2009, 2010, it's percentages of where the income came from. Yeah, local authority funding, semi-state funding, commercial sponsors, ticket sales, and then miscellaneous or other income. Everybody could do that, not huge. But just again, to give people a sense of where the money comes from and the variation in that, because after 2020's reports go in, there will be some significant variation in incomes. Now, I will send some links to those reports to you all as well in the next set of slides that we're going to send around. But that's pretty much public relations, a very fast masterclass in some public relations pointers and how to use an annual report. And again, I would stress that for the key stakeholders and for the key funders and sponsors to your organization, to send them a copy by email of the annual report is very worthwhile. Even if they don't read it, it's another two-way sense of communication in letting them feel part of your journey in you achieving your results. Okay, so if people want to unmute or to fire some questions, I'll go into the chat zone and we'll see what people want to ask me about or to comment on. Will that be fair?
Perfect. Another excellent presentation, Colm. Thank you. Very informative. If anybody wants to unmute and shout, if there's a question, go ahead. Please feel free to do so, or pop it into the chat function and myself or Eamon can pick it up, whatever suits. We'll just give everybody a few minutes to reflect and come back if there's anything.
Have a swig of tea.
Exactly, or water, whatever you have to hand.
I apologize again for the content. It's large, but I suppose I'm trying to pack as much in from a number of seasons of observations.
Yeah, and we'll share the slides early next week as well, which will be helpful. Doesn't seem to be anything coming through from questions.
This is coming in as compliments. So I don't know if you can take this level of compliments every week from Donegal. Save them up. You may need them again for another day.
Eamon, I love the way you always ground me at the end of these sessions.
If anybody needs to be brought down to earth, I'm your man.
That's a lady, Eamon. Could I ask a question here, Colm, just to
please, yeah.
Start it off? And thank you. I unfortunately missed last week's session, but I have the recording to watch yet. It was really interesting. I was interested in that stock photography piece. I think it's something that we all miss out on. We all think we have that kind of phone in your pocket and away you go. Like, how would you, I suppose, propose people do that? Is it, think about what it is you want to sell, or, do you need a cute kid in the picture, or, would the chairman be annoyed that they were?
I think you have to, I would always make a list of the 5 or 8 iconic backdrops in your area or your village or your town or your streetscape, that if somebody sees them in Boston or in Birmingham or in Brisbane, they instinctively go, aha, that's Letterkenny, aha, that's Dunfanny, aha, that's Gidoi. And then what is it in your program that you're doing when it's happening and everyone is busy making the program happen, that if 2 or 3 people could go and take time out and stand at the spinning wheel or at the pump or at the church gate or at the village mill or at the mill wheel or wherever it is that you could create a moment, to make a list of those things and then get the photographer in 2 weeks beforehand and walk with him or her around and go, we need a photograph here of the heritage afternoon. The ICA folks usually are here baking their bread and churning their butter. And we'd love to get a shot with the church spire of the Church of Ireland Church there and the ladies doing their stuff down here. But where would you need to be for that shot to work now if we get good weather on the Saturday and Sunday? So that they're not having to do it on the fly. And they might say, oh, well, I need a spot over there. So can you put a bollard or put a steward over there to keep that space free for me? So I can go in there with my stepladder and just, I'll be able to get the angle of the church spire, the ladies doing the churning and the butter making, and the crowd. That'd be nice. Just remind me again, how far would you run those barriers into that activity? So that's shot number one. Yeah. And you make a list of maybe 8 or 9 of those iconic shots, and you let the photographer know where on the program events the personnel will be available to come to that location and to do that. And then if 5 or 8 are slated, in other words, they're provisionally booked, and low cloud or a thunderstorm just after the parade or something happens, you at least will get 3 or 4 that you can use. So that's how I would go about doing it, and that's how I think the wise around it. And then don't release those shots. Maybe release one at the time of the post-festival Mardi Gras, and then hang on to them for different parts of the year, and hang on to them for your website and for your social media campaign that you can drop in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that help?
It is. No, it's it's thinking that longer term piece. We all think, here's a mobile phone and it's on Facebook and it's gone, and sure, nobody was standing right.
No, I mean, obviously, I would encourage everyone, if you put out 15 volunteers into a Heritage Day or into a Gymkhana or into a jumble sale or into a Carrick treasure hunt, and you say, look, if you see interesting stuff and fun stuff, please snap and send into the group WhatsApp page. That's fine, but there's spur of the moment stuff. And, it's funny, there was a €4,500 budget to the big granny coming to Limerick for the Limerick City of Culture in 2014. The Royal Lux Company of France were commissioned to produce this huge show. And €6,500 was the tender for media services to the City of Culture for that. And a Garda went live dancing alongside Granny inside the barriers as this huge giant passed through William Street in Limerick. And the Garda went boogieing or shimming as the Granny was passing with a small 5-year-old child. And the other Garda that was with him or her, I think it was a him, took a YouTube clip of that, and it went mega viral. So in today's world, you need to combine both to make sure you can get the spirit of the moment, and you also get that Loch Ness discovery photograph that's staged, that's choreographed, but that the picture tells the story. And you can't do that with volunteers who've got to be watching crowds, moving barriers, getting egress routes kept for fire brigade, for ambulance, making sure prizes are brought to the stage. They have enough to do. They really have.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you. I'll leave it if there's any other questions.
Sure.
Anything else from anybody? Feel free to unmute. We'll just give it literally a few seconds, and if not, we'll wrap it up for today. No, nothing.
Does anyone feel that was too long or too much material? If I can ask that question.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all good. A few thumbs up there.
Perfect.
Okay, Colm, thank you very much again for today, and thank you to everybody for joining us. Back in Thursday the 26th, this day fortnight, same time for the next session, and we'll see everybody then.
Great.
Thank you.
Have a good fortnight.
All the best.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Are we